Hello students. Today we are going to do second part of the chapter The Enemy. Let's start. The master ought not to heal the wound of this white man, he said bluntly to Hannah. The white man ought to die. First he was shot, then the sea caught him and wounded him with her rocks. The master heals what the gun did and what the sea did. They will take revenge on us. Bluntly means in a straightforward manner. Here we are reading what happens when the servants of Hannah and Sadao come to know that Hannah and Sadao are treating an American and America was the enemy of Japan. What happens then? How servants treat them? We are going to study. Then the old gardener spoke bluntly to Hannah. He said that Sadao must not treat the injured white man. He reasoned that the man was destined to die. Firstly, he had been wounded by a gunshot, and secondly, the rocks of the sea wounded him further. If Sadao healed the wounds given by the gun and the sea, then the gun and the sea would treat them as enemies and seek revenge. The gun presents the Japanese army and the sea represents the country of Japan. If they treated the enemy, they would be punished by Japan. I will tell him what you say, Hannah replied courteously. But she herself was also frightened, although she was not superstitious as the old man was. Could it ever be well to help an enemy? Nevertheless, she told Yumi to fetch the hot water and bring it to the room where the white man was. She went ahead and slid back the partitions. Sadao was not yet there. Yumi, following, put down her wooden bucket. Then she went over to the white man. When she saw him, her thick lips folded themselves into stubbornness. I have never washed a white man, she said, and I will not wash so dirty a one now. Stubbornness means firm determination, दृढ़ निश्चय कर लेना. Hannah went inside first and moved the partition to one side. Sadao was not there. Yumi followed her and tapped the wooden stick on the floor. As she saw the white man, her thick lips folded as the expression on her face indicated her determination. She said firmly that she had never washed an American and that she would never wash one who was as dirty as that injured man. Hannah cried at us severely. You will do what your master commands you. Hannah reacted to Yumi's refusal. She screamed at her that she was supposed to follow her master's orders. There was so fierce a look of resistance upon Yumi's round dull face that Hannah felt unreasonably afraid. After all, if the servants should report something that was not as it happened. Fierce means dangerous. Resistance, the refusal to accept or comply with something. Yumi resisted strongly. Her dull face had a dangerous look of protest, which scared Hannah. She was worried that if the servants reported something different from what had happened, they could land into trouble. Very well, she said with dignity. You understand, we only want to bring him to his senses so that we can turn him over as a prisoner. Dignity, respect. Hannah changed her expressions to respect and said, very well. She explained to Yumi that they intended to bring the unconscious man into his senses and then they would hand him over as a prisoner. I will have nothing to do with it, Yumi said. I am a poor person and it is not my business. Yumi said that she was not concerned about their plans. She added that she was a poor person and it was none of her business to know about their plans. Then please, Hannah said gently, return to your own work. At once Yumi left the room, but this left Hannah with the white man alone. She might have been too afraid to stay, had not her anger at Yumi's stubbornness now continued. Hannah said to Yumi that she should return to her work. Yumi left the room at once. Hannah was again left alone with the white man. She would have been afraid to remain there all alone, but her anger on Yumi's firm determination made her stay in the room. Stupid Yumi, she muttered fiercely. Is this anything but a man and a wounded, helpless man? Hannah said with anger that Yumi was a stupid person. She said that it was just an injured man. In the conviction of her own superiority, she bent impulsively and untied the knotted rugs that kept the white man covered. Conviction means firm belief, pakka vishwas. Impulsively, to do something suddenly without thinking. Rugs, blanket. Hannah was so full of anger at the refusal by the maid Yumi that without thinking, she opened the blanket in which the man was injured. When she had his breast bare, she dipped the small clean towel that Yumi had brought into the steaming hot water and washed his face carefully. Then man's skin, though rough with exposure, was of a fine texture and must have been very blunt when he was a child. Blunt means of light color. His chest was bare. Hannah took a small clean towel, dipped in the steaming hot water, and washed his face. The man's skin was rough due to being exposed to the sun, but it had a good texture and must have been very fair as a child. While she was thinking these thoughts, though not really liking the man better now that he was no longer a child, she kept on washing him until his upper body was quite clean, but she dared not turn him over. Where was Sadao? Hannah kept on cleaning the man's upper body As she had these thoughts, she did not have the courage to turn him over and thought of Sadao. Now her anger was ebbing. Ebbing means decreasing gradually. And she was anxious again, and she rose, wiping her hands on the wrong towel. Then, lest the man be chilled, she put the quilt over him. Her anger was decreasing and she started becoming restless. She stood up and wiped her hands with the wrong towel, as she did not want the man to freeze due to the cold weather. She put the quilt on him. Sadao, she called softly. He had been about to come in when she called. His hands had been on the door and now he opened it. She saw that he had brought his surgeon's emergency bag and that he wore his surgeon's coat. Hannah called out to Sadao softly. He had been on the door when she called him. He opened the door. Hannah saw that Sadao was carrying his surgeon's emergency bag and was wearing his surgeon's coat. He was prepared to operate upon the injured man. You have decided to operate? She cried. Yes, he said shortly. He turned his back to her and unfolded the sterilized towel upon the floor of the Tokonoma alcove and put his instruments out upon it. Sterilized means disinfected. Hannah asked Sadao that had he decided to operate the man. Sadao replied that he had decided to operate him. He turned his back to Hannah as he did not want her to object to his decision. Sadao started his work. He opened a sterilized towel on the floor of the Tokonoma alcove and placed his surgical instruments on it. What is meant by Tokonoma alcove? The word toko literally means floor or bed. Ma means space or room. In English, tokonoma is usually called alcove. It is a part of a room where things are displayed. An alcove in a Japanese home for displaying a flower arrangement, kekemono, or other piece of art. Fetch towels, he said. Sadao asked Hannah to get some towels. She went obediently, but how anxious now, to the linen shelves and took out the towels. There ought also to be old pieces of matting so that the blood would not ruin the fine floor covering. She went out to the back veranda where the gardener kept strips of matting with which to protect delicate shrubs on cold nights and took an armful of them. Hannah obeyed Sadao and went out to get towels. She was curious as Sadao was operating upon the injured man. She thought that the blood from his wounds would stain the fine mat which covered the floor of the room. So she got some rough mats from the backyard which were used by the gardener to cover the delicate shrubs from the cold weather. But when she went back into the room, she saw this was useless. The blood had already soaked through the packing in the man's wound and had ruined the mat under him. By the time Hannah reached to the room, she saw that blood had flowed through the bandage on the man's wound and had stained the mat beneath him. He, her, her effort was futile. Oh, the mat, she cried. Yes, it is ruined, Sadao replied, as though he did not care. Help me to turn him, he commanded her. She obeyed him without a word and he began to wash the man's back carefully. On seeing the stained mat, Hannah cried that the mat had been spoiled. Sadao agreed that the mat had been ruined in such a manner which indicated that he was not bothered by it. Sadao ordered Hannah to help him turn the man over. She obeyed him and then Sadao started washing his back. Yumi would not wash him, she said. Did you wash him? Then Sadao asked, not stopping for a moment of his swift, concise movements. Concise, short. Hannah told Sadao that Yumi had refused to wash the injured man. Sadao asked her that did she wash him? He did not stop cleaning him. He made fast, small movements of his hands as he cleaned him carefully. Hannah replied in positive. He did not seem to hear her, but she was used to his absorption when he was at work. Sadao was engrossed in work and did not seem to hear Hannah. She wondered for a moment if it mattered to him what was the body upon which he worked so long, as it was for the work he did so excellently. Hannah wondered that Sadao was not bothered who the injured man was. He was only concerned in performing his work well. You will have to give the anesthetic if he needs it, he said. Anesthetic, a substance that induces insensitivity to pain. Sadao told Hannah that she would have to inject the injured man with a substance that induces insensitivity to pain. She repeated blankly, but never have I. Hannah replied that she had never done that earlier. It's easy enough, he said impatiently. Sadao said in a haste that it was very easy. He was taking out the packing now and the blood began to flow more quickly. Sadao was removing the packing and now the blood started flowing faster. He peered into the wound with the bright surgeon's light fastened on his forehead. He looked at the wound with the help of the bright surgeon's light fixed on his forehead. The blood is still there, he said with cool interest. He announced that the blood was inside the man's body. Now I wonder how deep this rock wound is. He wondered that how deep the wound made by the rock was. If it is not too deep, it may be that I can get the blood. He said that if the wound was not very deep, then he could get the blood out. But the bleeding is not superficial. Superficial, existing or occurring at or on the surface. He has lost much blood. He added that the bleeding was not from the surface of the skin, which meant that the wound was deep and the man had already lost a lot of blood. At this moment, Hannah choked. He looked up and saw her face the color of sulfur means sulfur is a yellow colored element. The close means that her face became pale yellowish in color. When Hannah saw Sadao inspecting the wound, she could not see the site and so she coughed. Sadao looked at her and showed that her face was yellowish in color like the color of sulfur. Don't faint, he said sharply. He did not put down his exploring instrument. If I stop now, the man will surely die. She clapped her hands to her mouth and leaped up and ran out to the room. Outside in the garden, he heard her retching, but he went on with his work. Leaped, jumped, retching, vomiting. Sadao reacted and ordered Hannah not to faint. He did not stop his work and continued inspecting the wound. Sadao said that if he stopped, the injured man would certainly die. Hannah put both her hands on her mouth, jumped up, and ran out of the room. Sadao heard her vomiting in the garden, but he continued with his work. It will be better for her to empty her stomach, he thought. He had forgotten that, of course, he had never seen an operation. But her distress and his inability to go to her at once made him impatient and irritable with this man who lay like dead under his knife. As Sadao needed Hannah's help to operate the man, he thought that it would be better for her to empty her stomach so that she would not feel uneasy time and again. He was reminded that Hannah was seeing an operation for the first time and it was not a pleasant thing to see. Sadao was irritated and impatient as his wife was under stress and he was not able to help her due to the man who lay under his knife. He was just like a dead person. This man, he thought, there is no reason under heaven why he should live. Sadao thought that there was no reason for him to make efforts to save the man because there was no reason for him to live. Unconsciously, this thought made him ruthless and he proceeded swiftly. In his dream, the man moaned, but Sadao paid no heed except to mutter at him. Ruthless, harsh, merciless, moaned, made low, soft sound due to pain. Pay no heed, did not pay attention. Sadao became merciless and started working fast. The injured man moaned in his state of unconsciousness. But Sadao kept on working without paying attention to the man's pain. Groan, he muttered. Groan if you like. I am not doing this for my own pleasure. In fact, I do not know why I am doing it. Sadao said to the injured man that he was free to cry in pain. Sadao was not concerned that the man was in pain. He did not want to operate him and did not have any reason for doing so. The door opened and there was Hannah again. Hannah entered the room and asked Sadao, "Where is the anesthetic?" she asked in a clear voice. She asked thou for the anesthetic which she had to administer to the injured man. Her voice was clear, shows that now she was prepared to help him. Sadao motioned with his chin. It is as well that you came back, he said. This fellow is beginning to stir. Sadao moved his chin to guide her to the bottle of anesthetic. He added that it was good that she came, as the man had started to gain consciousness and it was important to sedate him. She had the bottle and some cotton in her hand. But how shall I do it? She asked. Hannah held the bottle and some cotton in her hands. She asked what she was supposed to do. Simply saturate the cotton and hold it near his nostrils. Sadao replied without delaying for one moment. The intricate detail of his work when he breathes badly moves it away a little. He told her to put some anesthetic on the cotton and to place the cotton near the man's nostril. He did not stop his delicate work and added that she should remove the cotton when the man started to breathe badly. She crouched close to the sleeping face of the young American. It was a piteously thin face, she thought, and the lips were twisted. The man was suffering, whether he knew it or not. Watching him, she wondered if the stories they heard sometimes of the sufferings of the prisoners were true. They came like flickers of rumor told by words of mouth and always contradicted. In the newspapers, the reports were always that wherever the Japanese armies went, the people received them gladly, with cries of joy at their liberation. Crouched means sit in a squatting position, piteously causing you to feel sad and sympathetic. By the words of mouth, people tell it to each other rather than it being printed in written form. Hannah sat in a squat and went close to the face of the sleeping American man. She felt sad and sympathetic towards him as she saw his thin face and twisted lips. She knew that he was suffering. She wondered whether the stories that she had heard about the torture meted out to the prisoners were true. The stories were like rumors which spread when people told them to others. On the other hand, in the printed media like the newspapers, it was mentioned that Japanese army was welcomed wherever it went and people praised it for their freedom. But sometimes he remembered such men as General Takima, who at home beat his wife cruelly, though no one mentioned it. Now that he had fought so victorious a battle in Manchuria, if a man like that could be so cruel to a woman in his power, would he not be cruel to one like this? For instance, Hana recalled an officer of the Japanese army, General Takima, who was cruel to his wife and would beat her. No one talked about it anymore as he had won the war in Manchuria. Dear students, Manchuria, northeast China, is the homeland of the Manchu people. To the Chinese, the region is simply known as the Northeast. Manchuria is made up of China's three northeasternmost provinces, Liaoning, Jilin, and Heilongjiang. Hana thought that if a man could be cruel towards his wife, then he could also be cruel to the prisoners in his captivity. She hoped anxiously that this young man had not been tortured. It was at this moment that she observed deep red scars on his neck just under the ear. Scars, marks. Hannah hoped that the man had not been tortured by the army. Just then she saw deep red colored marks, injury marks on his neck under the ear. Those scars, she murmured, lifting her eyes to Sadao. But he did not answer. At this moment, he felt the tip of his instrument strike against something hard, dangerously near the kidney. Hannah mentioned the scars to Sadao and asked about them. Sadao did not answer. At that moment, the tip of his instrument hit something hard. Means the bullet. It was very close to the kidney. All thought left him. He felt only the purest pleasure. He probed with his fingers, delicately familiar with every atom of this human body. Sadao was not thinking of anything else. He was happy to have finally found the bullet. He moved his fingers inside the wound. Sadao was familiar with the tiniest part of the human body. Probed means searched. His old American professor of anatomy had seen to that knowledge. Ignorance of the human body is a surgeon's cardinal sin. Thus, he had thundered at his classes year after year to operate without as complete knowledge of the body as if you had made it. Anything less than that is murder. His professor of anatomy in America had told them that if a surgeon ignored the knowledge of any part of the body, it was the first misdeed that he had committed. To operate upon a body without detailed knowledge of it as much as who makes it has would amount to committing murder of that body. Sadao's professor would repeat these words in his class often. It is not quite at the kidney, my friend, Sadao murmured. It was his habit to murmur to the patient when he forgot himself in an operation. My friend, he always called his patients, and so now he did, forgetting that this was his enemy. Sadao spoke to the injured man. He said that the bullet had just missed his kidney. When Sadao would get engrossed in the operation, he would start talking to the patient. He addressed that patient as my friend. He called the injured man also my friend. He forgot that this man was not a friend but an enemy. Then quickly, with the cleanest and the most precise of incisions, Then quickly with the cleanest and the most precise of the incisions, the blood was out. The man quivered, but he was still unconscious. Nevertheless, he muttered a few English words. Bye, students.